and Gozo, and welcome to a very special episode of Lovin Daily. It's Christmas Eve. I'm your host, Sam Vasala, joined by our new strategist, Tim Diakono. How are you on Christmas Eve?
Feeling a bit joyous today. How are you?
Yeah, super. We're all festive for the season. So, just to remind you, this episode is brought to you by eCabs. eCabs are giving away €20,000 worth of free rides. And to take part, it's super simple. All you have to do is download the eCabs app, book yourself a ride, opt into the eCabs circle from their app, share this video and tag 3 of your friends in the comments below. Just to remind you as well, we have a super special, actually 2 special guests today. We have Maya Spiteri Dalli, the Secretary General of Malta Law Student Society, together with the President Matthew Charles Zammit. Let's get straight into the headlines, shall we? So, James Piscopo resigns as Land Authority CEO. The Chamber of Architects President slams MCDA flyover plans as unsustainable. Meanwhile, Maltese inspector explains why driving instructor and hairdresser partner were charged with money laundering. Hundreds of gifts were donated to vulnerable children as part of an inspirational drive. And lastly, University Law Group calls for the decriminalization of abortion. Let's get right into it.
Right, so Christmas Eve has started with another resignation. James Piscopo has stepped down as CEO of the Lands Authority. Now, the reasons for this aren't yet known. However, the timing of the resignation does come a few days after the Times of Malta published a report saying that James Piscopo had hidden around €600,000 in an offshore bank account in Jersey, and that the former Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Keith Schembri, was trying to get this report published in the media a few years ago. And apparently Keith Schembri tried to use his contact, that was Jorgen Fennig, the suspect, to get this dirt on James Piscopo published in the media. Questions were sent to James Piscopo by certain journalists. However, no story was published. Now, 2 years later, James Piscopo has resigned, which does indicate there might have been some element of truth in that.
Indeed, it's really been a year of resignations, hasn't it? I mean, we've seen the Attorney General go, the Police Commissioner, the Economic Crimes Unit Head, Conrad Mitzi resigned, Chris Cardona, but not Mark Camilleri, the Chairman of the National Book Council, thankfully. On to our next story. The Chamber of Architects President, Andrea Pizzuto, has slammed MCDA flyover plans as unsustainable. So, just to give you a bit of background, Transport Minister Ian Borge published a post boasting about a €13.5 million project by Infrastructure Malta, labelled as the MCDA Creek project. He was boasting that they already have 7 tenders, they're going to build these flyovers and a pedestrian area. The glaring problem is this hasn't even been presented in front of the planning authority, let alone an environmental impact assessment, let alone being vetted by the public. And this kind of just gives you an idea of, the way things unfortunately work in Malta, where we're 2 steps ahead, we don't follow our normal protocol of the way things work. The government doesn't, at least. I think the glaring problem, as Pizzuto said, is that we're still in this car-focused mentality. And if we ever want to progress away from that, building tarmac all over Malta is not the solution. The solution is moving away from cars. I don't know what you think about this.
Well, I mean, the problem is that the area is extremely notorious for heavy traffic. Cars have to drive down, there's traffic lights down there, and you often end up stuck at the very top of the hill, and you have to go all the way around to Hamrun to go to Valletta. So I understand why a flyover is necessary over there. That being said, if we're going to move away from cars and talk about depolluting the country, then why are we building more roads? It kind of doesn't make sense.
Exactly, and this whole vertical garden hype really doesn't make sense if we're just continuing to pollute.
Maybe they can put a vertical garden at the flyover as well.
Well, we'll see about that. On to the next story.
Yes.
Salary.
So quite an interesting one. A couple, a driving instructor and a hairdresser, have been charged with money laundering after the police from the money laundering unit found that they had, not only had they not declared their income properly, but they had also hidden away wads of cash at home, and that they had bought a Mercedes when it was quite expensive, not within their earnings. They had also bought a number of designer items. Now the interesting thing over here is that this investigation started off with a tax evasion investigation, which is not right, but it's pretty common. People not declaring their income properly. However, somehow it escalated into a full-blown money laundering investigation, even though police don't have any evidence that this money originated from a serious crime, with like drugs or human trafficking or weapons trading. No, the only crime that it originated from is tax evasion. Now this could set quite a nasty precedent for anyone who had evaded tax. Like, usually when you're found to evade tax, it's an administrative cost. You settle it with the taxman and you move on. If it's bad, then you get charged with tax evasion. But now they're getting charged with money laundering.
I mean, it's within the context, next year we'll have our, money evaluation. We failed it the first time. Unfortunately, if we fail it the second time, we may be grey-listed, which will be terrible news for our economy. So the question arises whether authorities are kind of overreaching to try and make sure that we're complying to these standards and effectively hurting people in the process.
The answer is yes.
The answer is yes. Debatable, I suppose, but yes. So, on to our next story. Hundreds of gifts have been donated to vulnerable children as part of an inspirational drive. So, there was a beautiful site at Castile yesterday with hundreds and hundreds of gifts under this massive tree, all part of this initiative spearheaded by Georgia May, the daughter of the Prime Minister, who basically asked her parents if Santa Claus was going to come this year because of the pandemic. So essentially they got their heads together. A lot of people donated these gifts for vulnerable children whose parents can't afford to provide this Christmas, unfortunately. It was a star-studded affair. There was Ben Camille, there was actress Clara Juice, there was even Joe, Mike and Lydon, the winners of Malta's Got Talent. Sorry to be a bummer here, but I think the glaring issue that I see over there is that we have at least 7,000 people who are at risk of poverty. Time will tell what the pandemic, the actual effects of the pandemic on these people, and whether initiatives like this are enough to kind of mitigate
clearly not
that.
enough, but it is a sweet gesture during Christmas time as well. Yeah. At the end of the day, I mean, it's to make sure that children aren't left without presents, because maybe the families can't afford, and must be really heartbreaking for a parent not to be able to, not to give your child a present because you simply can't afford it. So at least this will help quite a few people out in this respect.
I agree. So thank you, Georgia May.
Moving on. So the Maltese Law Student Association, the INSL, at the Studenti tal-Liġi have, come up with quite an interesting proposal. The decriminalization of abortion in Malta. So that would mean that that people who get pregnant in Malta will be able to get an abortion without fear that the police will come after them or after the doctors who perform them. Malta is one of the only countries in the world which does completely criminalize abortion in all circumstances. And now the debate does seem to be moving forward. We have some pretty brave young students who are putting their necks out and actually saying, now we need to upgrade our society a little bit. There's also quite a few other proposals that were issued as part of the policy paper, which includes things like condom machines at the university, free contraception, sexual health officers at schools. So quite a broad spectrum. Way up your street. Indeed,
yes, very up my street. Santa Claus, please make my Christmas dream come true, and let this be passed in the House of Representatives. So essentially, they called for the removal of 2 of the articles in Chapter 9 of the Criminal Code of Maltese law, which essentially criminalizes abortion. It means that if you are caught terminating a pregnancy, you could be liable to up to 3 years in prison. This would be the first step, essentially, in giving women the adequate reproductive health care that they deserve. Stay tuned. Now we have a special interview with 2 members from the Malta Student Society. But before that, here's a message from eCabs.
Hey everyone, we've got something huge up for grabs. Probably our biggest and best competition yet, worth a whopping 20,000 euros. And it's super easy to win. We've teamed up with e-cabs to give away 1 whole year's worth of free cab rides to 1 lucky winner. That's 12 whole months of ridiculous convenience and efficiency without spending a single cent on transport. They now don't only have the black cabs anymore. Awesome. How do you win? Step 1, download the eCabs app. Step 2, book yourself a ride and opt into the eCab Circle, which will allow you to save money, earn points, and get some great benefits. Step 3, share this video and tag 3 friends in the comments below. It's really that simple. Now, if an entire year's worth of free cab rides just doesn't do it for you, there's a bunch of other great prizes up for grabs, including a brand new iPhone 12 and so much more. And if you've already booked 1 ride this year, just opt in. Competition ends December 25th at midnight. This sounds almost too good to be true. Just opt in.
Sorry guys, I was stuck in traffic and I really couldn't find parking.
And we're back with our special interview. So Maya Spiteri Dalli and Matthew Charles Zammit, Secretary General and President of the Malta Law Students Society, are here to discuss their bold new policy paper in favor of decriminalizing abortion. So I read it yesterday. First of all, well done. Let's just talk a bit about that. You are in favor of decriminalizing abortion, amongst other bold reforms for sexual health in Malta. So can you explain to our audience what this paper actually entails?
So, first of all, thank you for having us here. We're very happy to be here and give a bit of insight on our paper, perhaps from our perspective as well. So the paper in itself is a 154-page research project. It's been drafted and proofread by students. It's also been peer-reviewed by different professionals in the field. Before thinking about how we're going about the situation of Malta and before, we obviously have to get a bit of an objective perspective. So we looked at the situation in Malta as it is at the moment. We exercised we did a bit of a comparative exercise. We also, that being said, we also went a bit above and beyond over the borders in Europe. We compared the situation in Brazil and Argentina, so we didn't just analyze European countries, because in common parlance you just hear comparison to other European countries, so it was important to look at the situation objectively. We went into the medical aspect of it, which we feel was important, as much as the psychological aspect for it, how it affects people's mental health, as well as ethical considerations, such as fathers' rights, there are a lot of questions that we had to consider. And it was only after doing all of these that we could move forward to writing and drafting actual proposals. So obviously, we're studying to become lawyers, so we have to remain impartial and loyal to the facts. So keeping that in mind and getting an objective perspective helped us kind of set the way for these proposals, so to speak.
So can we just run down a few of these proposals? So you're in favor of removing the 2 articles in the criminal code that effectively criminalize abortion. You're also in favor of free sanitary pads, condom machines with lubricants for tertiary institutions. Were there any others that are not coming to my head at the moment?
Of course. I believe that we also pointed out that the discourse, especially as journalists and political commentators, that the discourse on abortion and reproductive rights can sometimes muddle scientific fact with other sources of information which are not either peer-reviewed or reliable, and therefore we emphasized the need that whenever journalists and even members of the press corps and commentators, so on and so forth, discuss such a topic on abortion, they discuss it based solely on the facts and research available. It is a very tall task for the simple reason that it is a very sensitive topic, and notwithstanding everything, unfortunately, we are knowledgeable of the fact that this discussion has been tainted by certain beliefs which unfortunately are more emotional as opposed to based on science, and we are aware of that. So another step, I believe, was also related to the education curriculum and the sexual health policy.
Definitely.
And the reason that we decided to do such a widespread view of the topic was very simple. We had this discussion repeatedly at the exec in the policy committee, and the reason is this: you cannot talk on abortion on its own without discussing the alternative facts attached to it. The reality is that abortion is not a problem or a symptom. It is one out of many different topics falling under the umbrella that is sexual health policy. And on that aspect, you cannot just say, okay, we need to decriminalize these two articles, Article 241 and Article 243, without mentioning the other aspects related to it.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's all part and parcel, and it is unfortunately one of the last taboo issues in Malta. Now, I believe that you're the first, if not one of the first university groups to come out in favor of it in a policy paper, even before, I believe, the MMSA, which is the medical university group. So, what do you hope effectively that this policy paper achieves?
I mean, in all honesty, MMSA do a fantastic job in a lot of concepts. So I'd like to debug the thought that this is a popularity contest. From here, we commend them because, like us, they're a student organization. They deal with student problems on a day-to-day basis, and that is, I mean, time-consuming in a good way, but we commend them here nevertheless. I mean, what we hope to achieve, I mean, we have already handled previous subjects in our policy portfolio, such as euthanasia, adoption, and human trafficking, so this was almost a natural step. We hope that, I mean, the proposals themselves, as well as the research we have done, because it wasn't done from today till tomorrow, it took time, it took a lot of nights on Heidi doing our research. So we hope that with this proper research, the legislator, should there be a consideration for a bill in the future, uses it as kind of a setting stone for any possible bills.
This could effectively be a chance to even collaborate with the MMSA moving forward and effectively putting
Open to collaboration. We also hope that, I mean, we're not taking sides in this paper, but we're all in for an open and healthy discussion. We're all about I mean, it's literally one of the first things that we learn. We have to listen to our counterparts and discuss in a natural way. So that is very much important.
Indeed. So what has the reaction been to your paper?
We believe, at least the reaction that we got in the large majority has been positive by different academics as well as members of the legal profession and activists in the field who have all praised our work, and at the end of the day, some pushback we did get. It was quite obvious in this day and age.
And they have every right to.
And they have every right to. I believe also that certain people, as soon as they see the A word, they automatically tend to go back and take a few steps back, which is not what we want at the end of the day. Our idea is not to come and take a swimming bath at the subject. We are not the first organization in Malta to discuss the subject, not even remotely, and our aim is to supplement the discourse, not supplant it. Having said that, I am aware, unfortunately, that there has been some negative criticism just because we decided to discuss the topic and nothing else. And we expected this. The reality is we are aware that whenever the abortion debate decides to rear its head again, in reality we're going to get some pushback, and we're getting a lot of negative feedback, even based on the ocean of misinformation that we sometimes find ourselves in. Nevertheless, we remain positive and we remain optimistic about the future, and this policy paper is not the end product. We believe that this debate will continue on, and we our aim is for this policy paper to help in this debate and give a different view that perhaps wasn't specifically referenced before.
Mm-hmm. So what is that? In fact, that's my next question. So what is the next step for, you've drafted this policy paper, you've presented it to the world. Are you planning on actually presenting it to, say, the House of Representatives, members of Parliament, people in politics who can actually instigate this change?
If the opportunity arises, I see no reason why not. We already, I can confirm this, we already received feedback from a member of the European Parliament, a Maltese MEP, on this topic, and obviously other people related to activism have also approached us to discuss the topic further, and we welcome this. At the end of the day, any way in which we can ensure that this debate remains stuck to the facts and remains tangible as much as possible, even for the everyday layman who perhaps does not have the time to read all the legislation and all the medical research attached to it. But we remain confident and we remain optimistic that hopefully, if a change will come and there will come a time where a new act or a new bill or a new piece of legislation will be proposed, we hope that our policy paper will at least be used as some sort of basis or even some sort of reference point for when the time comes.
In fact, we encourage people to read it irrelevant of their views. It's an objective paper in itself. So honestly, everyone, irrelevant of their views, can go ahead and read it.
In fact, even in our paper, we did not just take a pro-choice stand. We interviewed people who come from the pro-life camp. Yes, members of the legal profession. It was, again, we are law students and therefore we want to take first and foremost the legal perspective. But we decided to interview both members of the legal profession from opposite camps in order to gain different perspectives. And I believe that the interviews gave us a whole lot to digest and discuss because they proved points which perhaps we as law students are still not knowledgeable about as much as members of the legal profession have been there for decades. So I do believe that it's an interesting read for anyone from whatever camp they come. And our proposals, while we do believe them because they are very concrete, they are very tangible, and they are very important to the paper, we are open to any feedback that may come and even any method in which we can ascertain that these proposals may be improved upon in the days to come.
So I know that you've done a lot of case studies. You looked at Brazil, you looked at member states of the European Union as well. In the case of Malta, in your opinion as law students, how do you think abortion will actually be decriminalized? Do you think it will take a referendum? Do you think it will be, as you said, maybe the superintendent of health proposing this to Parliament? Do you see this dialogue kind of moving into the channels of power anytime soon?
Well, the thing about our policy paper is rather than jumping straight to the criminalization, is that it takes a prevention is better than cure approach. And I say this because in itself the paper was objective, so we had to reflect first because before moving on to even speaking about abortion, we had to take a long, hard look at the current situation. You have a national sexual health policy that the last time was updated was 2011 to my knowledge, and I'm sure society has gone through some changes since then. You need to remove the stigma from contraceptives. You also need to realize that the morning after pill even though it has been available ever since 2016, it's still very much somewhat scarce and not even available in the hospital formulary. And so before even considering abortion, we reflected on all of these and we said, how can we make it better? So then we can move forward to the criminalization, even insofar as suggesting that the House of Representatives has a Women's Rights and Gender Equality Committee. Because if it starts from there and maybe discussion is very much empowering, it can change people's minds. So suggesting a committee is already, I think, a step in the right way, and it will, get our MPs talking. Therefore, we consider our proposals to be a sort of blueprint in that, okay, so if you want this to happen, you're going to have to fix this first, you're going to have to address this. So it's not just jumping straight, discuss, fix the problem, encourage contraception, encourage better education. So that is the whole point of the prevention is better than cure approach. Then once these are all handled and spoken about, then we can move forward to actually discussing decriminalization. And if it is discussed, we have our proposals, we have our research, reference can be made to it.
To be fair, in answer to your question, we're neither politicians nor prophets, so we definitely cannot tell you the way in which legalization of abortion can take place. It either can be the divorce route, which is an act of parliament, can either be through the work of civil society, who knows. As it is, our main priority is that, notwithstanding all this lack of clarity, we believe that our policy paper can be used as a stepping stone for further action in the future.
Indeed. So what role do you think young people have played in, the development of the dialogue with abortion, with sexual health? Do you think attitudes are changing in Malta? Do you think that is kind of instrumental to this debate?
Attitudes have changed, without a doubt, and I do believe that when comparing the attitude now as opposed to years before, there has been a more tolerant view on the subject, and there has been less gnashing of skulls and more civil conversations, which is always a good thing. I still believe there is a long way to go, and unfortunately, as it is, we have to come to it. If we wait for a popular mandate, I do believe that a lot more harm can be done to certain individuals if we have to wait for that moment when we say, okay, now it's popular, we can decide to move forward. It is why we decided to act now, because the situation in certain circumstances is harmful, and we believe that the harm done now needs to be rectified. That is one proposal of doing it. And we obviously not just the main experts on this topic, but I believe that many other professionals have discussed this topic, so everything needs to be taken into consideration. But I think that the perspective which are currently in place, unfortunately do more harm than good.
I mean, let's be honest though, young people have, well, the majority have access to the internet, they can all see what's happening in other countries. So I think being presented with new evidence, seeing what's happening in other countries, and even talking with friends has been, I think, a key point in changing your mind. For example, someone can be pro-choice, but then they can see something and they can switch to the opposite side. But what is a breath of fresh air for us is that people can, at least from what we've seen, people who, they can be either pro-life or they can be pro-choice, they can put that aside and have a civilized conversation about this and talk about it. So the fact that they can do that without getting personal is already a breath of fresh air. I mean, you respect each other's views, and the fact that you can have a mature conversation about it is honestly very refreshing. So from that aspect, I think so.
Perfect. So that is all from us here on Lovin Daily. This has been Matthew Charles Zammit and Maya Spiteri Dalli from Malta Law Students Society. Happy Christmas from all of us at Lovin Malta. Just to remind you, this episode was brought to you by eCabs. They're giving away €20,000 worth of free rides. Learn all about it from our page on Lovin Malta and have a day full of love.